In this video, I want to explicate and expand on the expectations and guidelines for the reading response questions. I want to make sure that we're getting the most out of these readings and we're satisfactorily fulfilling the protocols of the different activities. So let me read through this and I'll explain as I go through. Reading response questions, or RRQs as I refer to them, are designed to help us gain more from the texts we read. In order to achieve this goal, it's important that we read the text carefully and thoroughly before we respond to the questions. And because we are trying to practice expanding our ideas and increasing our specificity in our writing, we need to include specific quotations and details from the readings in our responses. So I want to pause for a second. It should go without saying that we actually need to read the corresponding text, right? It should go without saying, but I'm saying it anyway. It needs to be very apparent that you've actually read through the reading, and so it's important that you're setting yourself up for success by following these guidelines. So let me go ahead and walk you through this. So to complete the RRQs satisfactorily, follow these guidelines. So the first thing that you should do is read through the set of RRQs before you begin reading the corresponding text. This will provide you with a heads up on what to expect in the text. So this is something that we call previewing in a way, because it's giving you a little bit of foreknowledge about what to expect in the reading that will ultimately help you comprehend what you're reading, because you have a little bit of that foreknowledge to scaffold the different ideas that you're encountering. So read through the set of questions first. So then once you're ready to begin reading the text itself, the corresponding reading, first of all, find a place where you're actually going to be able to focus. I know it can be difficult to find a distraction-free zone, especially if we're working from home with family and whatnot, but try your best. So one way to do this is to eliminate distractions such as TV. Put your phone away so that it's not buzzing at you or you vying for your attention. It's always a good idea to not listen to music that has lyrics in it or words, because the words, we often have emotional attachments to the words, and so our brain is kind of half paying attention to that, which pulls us out of the thing that we're reading. If we're reading things like the newspaper or skimming through the news or whatever, that's fine to have music going on because we don't really need to pay close attention. But for things like this, like the different essays in Habits of the Creative Mind, they're dealing with complex ideas, so we want to make sure that we're able to focus on them as much as possible. Okay, so that's one thing to do. But another thing to do to set yourself up for success is to have a pen or a pencil in hand and a notebook open. Okay, so the pen or pencil, and I recommend a pen or a pencil versus a highlighter. That allows you to underline things that stand out to you as interesting. So some things like, oh, that's kind of interesting, I never thought of that before. Or if something is important, like, oh, that seems like a really key idea, I better underline that. Or if it's confusing, like, I'm not really sure what I understand or what they're getting at here. Underline those things, so things that are interesting, important, or confusing, so that when you go back to the text, you have those things identified, and that will help you when you're trying to respond to the questions. Additionally, jot down connections to other ideas or texts. So if you've encountered something that connects to an idea that you've thought of before, experienced before, encountered before, write a little note to yourself. Or maybe there's an idea that relates to something else that you've read. So especially if it's from another essay in Habits of the Creative Mind, great thing to make a note of. And you'll also want to write down any questions that you might have. So you could do that in the margin of the book itself or in your notebook, right? Now I know we've been conditioned to not write in our books. This is especially true in K through 12, because if we're writing in the books, that means we're kind of destroying the property, and the books need to be used for future generations of students, right? However, in college, writing in your book is actually a way to show your book that you love it. And I know you all love your books, right? So we want to really show our books that we love them by writing in them, annotating, okay? If you are using the electronic version of the book, you should be able to use your computer or e-reader's annotation or highlighting feature to annotate. So usually the computer is going to have some kind of function, or your e-reader is going to have some kind of function where you can actually annotate it, right? So highlight, even jot down little notes. So this is what we call active reading, and this was talked about in that short video you all watched at the beginning of the week talking about active reading, right? So these are things that we want to do. We want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success when we're going in to read. So having our pen or pencil handy, notebooks open, distraction-free zone, ready to focus. With the formatting of the reading response questions, just make sure that they're clearly labeled. So question 1, question 2, question 3. Some of you have been copying and pasting the question itself, and then underneath the question writing your response. I think that's a really good idea. That keeps the question right there, fresh in your mind. You could just look right up when you're typing into your Google Doc or whatever, and that can ensure that you're going to respond to the full question, right? Because some of the questions have multiple components, so we want to make sure that we're responding to the full question. The next thing, so in your responses, include specific quotations from the reading. Okay, so it's really important that you're actually pulling quotations from the text itself and including it in your response. Okay, so be sure to explain how and why the quotation you included adequately responds to the question. So don't just put the quotation in there and then leave it be. You want to make sure that you're explaining the quotation. So what does it mean? Why does it respond to this question? So this not only challenges you to read more closely, but also helps you to be more specific in your writing in general. This is good practice for including specific quotations in our essays, for example. One of the reasons we're doing these reading response questions is to practice that, practice our specificity, practice explaining quotations and including them in our responses to develop our ideas, okay? So that's one of the key reasons we're doing this. And then finally, proofread. Proofread. Take pride and ownership over the work you produce. If you want your work to be taken seriously, you too must take it seriously. That's just the facts of life. And I've mentioned this elsewhere. Writing is something that, whether we like it or not, is an extension or representation of ourselves. People judge us based on the things that we put into the world, right? And so if you want to be judged in a way that is indicative of who you are, the work you've put into something, then you actually need to make it look like you've put work into it. So one way to do that is to proofread. Don't just fire off the questions and shoot it off into the assignment slot and call it good. Read through them first. Now, one way that I proofread is to read out loud to myself. I find that it helps me pay closer attention to the words because I need to actually say them. And in order to say them correctly, I need to read the word correctly, right? So that forces me to pay closer attention, but also just hearing what it sounds like helps me to determine if it makes sense. So that's one method. Obviously, there are many ways to proofread, but please do that. So if these guidelines are not followed, or if it's apparent the student has not carefully read the text, they will need to revise and resubmit their reading response questions. Okay, so it's really important that you're actually taking these seriously, you're putting forth the needed effort on the first go so that you're not going to need to revise them. And again, I'm just going to mention it again, should go without saying, but I'm saying it, you need to actually read the reading. Okay, it's pretty clear when people aren't reading or reading very carefully by their responses. So, all right, well, if you have any questions about this, you can always message me. I'm happy to respond or talk further about it. All right, y'all, happy reading.